Welcome to your headquarters for knowledge and helpful advice on a variety of topics, all from trusted experts in their fields. It's time for River City Podcast. Jason B. Ingram is an accomplished professional with an associate's degree in financial services and a bachelor's degree in business administration, currently serving as the sales manager at Indercon LLC. He brings a wealth of experience in warehouse planning and automation to drive business growth and strengthen client relationships. But beyond his professional achievements, Jason is a devoted father, son, and friend. Having navigated profound personal loss in a short period of time, he is on a journey of healing and is deeply committed to supporting others facing similar challenges. Through his experiences, he encourages others to embrace the idea that it's okay to not be okay and offers hope and understanding to those who need it most. All right, Jason, thank you for joining us today.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for having me.
Your story is incredibly powerful, and we do appreciate that you're sharing it. And I want to start at the beginning. Let's start with what led you to chase your dream and move to Myrtle Beach.
Well, the girls and I had lived in a house right next door to my parents, and we'd been there for over 10 years. And, just me and the girls. And about 5 years in, I let a buddy of mine move in from high school, and they were kind of, first couple of days, another guy in the house, they're kind of like, ugh. But then they, saw he was basically me.
Right.
And
another you.
And then boundaries were off. They treated him just like they did me. And so we all lived there for about 5.5 years. And then the landlord wanted to get out of the landlord business. He offered the house to me. I was not in a position to buy it. The girls were both legal adults.
Yeah.
So we sat down and talked about it. And I said, what do you want to do? I said, Daddy wants to go to the beach. That's what always been my dream. I actually was offered a job in Myrtle in 2013, but they didn't want to leave their friends. And I had been put through that as a kid. So I was like, okay. But, they were fine with it. My oldest, she moved in with her mom. She got married back in 2022, and she was, that was her first real boyfriend at 13 years old. And
wow.
Yeah. So I helped Sarah get an apartment, and I went down there, and I enjoyed it. There I was, and living the vacation life.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. What was that transition like for you? And I guess you had no sort of idea of the challenges that were yet to come at that point.
Well, I lost about 40 pounds walking all the time.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, because it's the first time in my life I'd ever been by myself. And if I wanted to get the oil changed in the car, I wouldn't make an appointment. There was a Firestone right there close to the strip. I just take it, and it's going to be about 3 hours. I'm like, that's fine.
And go wander around.
I'd just go walk the boardwalk, and my apartment that I got was on the 3rd floor, so I was getting a lot of walking up and down through there. And my roommate, actually, after I'd been there about a month, he actually called and was like, can I come with you? I'm like, yeah, come on, man. Came down there, and so then I had some company again. So
nice. We actually spend a lot of time near Wilmington, so not too terribly far, or outside of Wilmington at the beach. I love that area. Well, so you get there, and then it's not very long after that your father was diagnosed, and that was pulmonary fibrosis.
Yes.
And so how did that start to impact you at that point?
Well, it was about a month and a half after I'd signed my lease. My dad was always my hero. He was a musician, and I followed that man around from the time that I was old enough to remember. So it hit me because, I wasn't next door anymore. So I was doing a lot of traveling back and forth when I wasn't working. On my 2 days off, I was coming home and hanging around. And
he was in Virginia?
Yes, ma'am. He was in Richmond. And, trying to help where I could.
And then, it's really around the same time that your daughter's boyfriend, Isaac, was murdered.
It was about 4 months later. It was
4 months.
It was in August. Yep. He was shot and killed right in front of his mother's home. That is still unsolved.
And that is a Virginia cold case.
Yes. Richmond PD has that case.
And you eventually, with all this going on, made the decision to come on back to Richmond. Can you walk us through kind of what happened, leaving and coming back?
Well, as soon as he got diagnosed, I knew I was going to come back. That was, I told Mark, I'm like, all right, I got to go back. Yeah. He was like, that's fine. I'm following you. I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
And like I said, couldn't get out of my lease early. Well, after the move, I didn't have the money to get out of my lease early. So I was, like I said, working and coming a lot of back and forth. And then once, she was with her boyfriend when he was killed. She was standing right next to him. And so I can only imagine. I mean, it's bad. It'd be bad enough standing next to a stranger.
Right.
They get shot and killed. But when you're standing next to somebody, they were young, so you don't know what happened down the road. But at the time, teenage love, and somebody you think you're going to spend the rest of your life with, I can't even imagine. Yeah. I can't imagine what she went through. And so I was definitely doing a lot of coming back and forth then.
So first your dad, then Isaac, and then I know this part is tough, but walk us through kind of what happened next with Sarah Linn and the timing.
Well, but after Isaac, I had 3 very close friends between September and December pass. One from her breast cancer returned. Then I had another friend that just wasn't feeling real well, and his wife finally talked him into going to the hospital, and they sent him home on hospice with colon cancer that they couldn't do nothing for. And then I had another friend of mine in December that passed from COVID that year. And, so I was able to get out of my lease a little bit early and found a house, not the one I was in, but the one next door to it came available. So it was 2 doors over from my parents, and Sarah was all excited because I'd actually tried to talk her into coming out of the beach just to
get away
and clear her mind. Even the police were like, look, we don't know who did this. We don't know if you might be a target. You should go with your dad. And she was determined that she was going to find out who killed her boyfriend. She started the hashtag Justice for Isaac, and it's it's not as big as a lot of hashtags, but it got a very good following around here. And so we got the place and went down, rented the U-Haul, got that filled, came back, and pulled it in the driveway on a Friday night. And we had painters coming the next morning. Her and a friend of hers that she was with left. And, I had 2 boys when I was very young that lived with my parents all their lives. And the oldest one left, went up the street, and he called. He said, something's going on top of the road. I can't go left on Beulah Road. Oh, okay. Well, we didn't hear any sirens or anything. So, and my dad was actually in the hospital not in the hospital. He'd been in the hospital for COVID and pneumonia at the same time, and they'd sent him to a rehab center. So later that afternoon, I was supposed to go pick him up. He was coming home. But then the next boy, he left about an hour and a half later, and he called and said whatever was going on was still going on. And we went, oh, okay. Then it was time to go get my dad, and got up to the top of the road, and I just happened to look, and I saw the car.
You recognized the car?
Well, I didn't fully recognize it, but it looked familiar. So I turned right, circled back through the neighborhood, and pulled off to the side. And, police officers are funny about people getting out of the car with stuff like that. And I got out of the car, and one came walking toward me. I said, sir, I'm not trying to be nosy, but that looks a lot like the car my daughter left at the house in. It was literally 45 seconds away from the house. And he said, what's your daughter's name? And I told him. I said, Sarah Linn Ingram. He said, just hang tight, hold on a minute. And then another officer walked over and told me she had passed.
God.
I'll try to keep this together.
Yeah. It's just, I don't know if I shared this with you, but my stepbrother died in a motorcycle accident at 18. And my dad was a police officer who, handled all of the coroner calls. And so we had, a very similar situation where it was an accident that you were trying to figure out. He had somebody else's ID on him, so that got confused. And we've been there. We've been there in that place. So obviously, extremely devastating. Can you talk us through how you began to even begin to process that kind of grief?
Shock is.
Yeah.
It went from shock to, is this real, to anger, and just all over the place. I didn't mess with that house for probably 2 weeks. A lot of her stuff was still in the living room. And, I kind of just, if you've ever had to do this, and, most people our age have, but.
It's amazing how many haven't.
That's true. But, for anybody that has, I think they'll understand this. You're so busy with the funeral arrangements and, everything that comes along with that, the viewing, the funeral, you want to throw your phone across the floor because people mean well, but how many times can you say thank you? And, like I said, I know people mean well, and it's not telling people not to reach out. I mean, some people need to talk. Others, like me, I just want to be left alone.
Well, here's a tip I would just say to anyone who is friends or has a loved one that's going through something like what you went through that I learned a long time ago is, of course, you reach out, but you finish your sentence. You end it with, you do not need to respond to this.
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted you to know that I'm thinking about you.
Yeah, and I think I had met Isaac's mother, on a few occasions. I'd never met his father. And this number kept calling me over and over again that I did not recognize. And I just kept hitting the ignore button. And he finally left a message saying, I want to help, please call me back. And that's when I spoke to him for the first time.
Well, I mean, yeah, the two of you, just what a connection I would imagine that would be, that you both had this tragic loss of two children that loved each other.
Within 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, he was very gracious. He, because again, it was trying to figure out what to do, how are we going to do this? I mean, and this is not a plug for life insurance, but I mean, if you got children, whole life, if, God forbid you ever need it for what it's there for, but it'll gain interest. You can use it for college. You can use it for anything once they turn 18.
They can use it for a car.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If they don't want to go to school, they can use it for whatever. But again, it didn't, I didn't know what I was going to do. And he called and said that he had gotten a couple of spots at Sunset, and he wanted to offer me one for her so she could be close to Isaac. That's where she's at.
Wow. Yeah, I've had a lot of, with networking and things, a lot of life insurance people that I've talked to, and it's when you go through something like this, the last thing you need on top of everything else is to have that financial stress, and to not know how you're going to handle it. I mean, that is just compounding all of it. So let's talk a little bit. Mark was your longtime roommate and friend, and it wasn't long after your oldest daughter's wedding that he passed away. Was that before Sarah or after?
It was after.
After.
I mean, within it was June of 2022. So her in February, and like I said, the similarities with her and Isaac. Isaac was supposed to be his brother's best man for his upcoming wedding. Sarah was supposed to be, of course, Tori's maid of honor. And, Mark had some health problems. He had been in a wreck and had some heart issues, had a defibrillator in his chest. And there had been times where if he had passed, I wouldn't have been surprised. But he'd been doing well. He went to Tori's wedding. God, I think he cried more than I did at Tori's wedding. But, every time my dad would move, he was like, Daddy, you need some help? You need some help? I got you. And I'm like, thank you. And, 3 days after her wedding, it was a Monday, and we were watching, something came on TV, and they were advertising the 20th anniversary of John Cena. I'm like, oh, Lord, he's been around 20 years.
Wow.
We are getting old. Yeah. So, we watched that night, and he went upstairs and went to bed, and, my fiance and I got up the next morning, and we were downstairs drinking coffee, and it just hit me that I hadn't even heard him get up and use the bathroom or anything like that. So I went up there and, hey, man, come on, get your day started. Coffee's on. Nothing, no grunt. Don't you do this to me. And I went there and shook him, and he was, my fiance is a certified EMT, and I yelled for her, and, she come upstairs, and she said, honey, he's gone, call 911. And I was just like, So.
It's just, I really don't think that I've ever met anyone that has had as many hits in a row as you.
It's in the 3.5 year process. It's been 12 to 13 people.
God. So are there any tools that you were given or that you had friends reach out with or therapy to help you navigate all this? I mean, talk us through that. I mean, even just getting up every day must have been a struggle.
Well, I kind of jumped over it, but it's like once you're done with the funeral and, then you could do the burial and, you kind of look around like, what now?
Yeah.
And now what? There's nothing left to do. I was so up and down but it's like every time I thought I could just pick up and move or try to start doing stuff, there would get another phone call.
Right.
And
you start getting yourself up off the ground where you've been knocked down, and you get knocked down again.
Yeah. I mean, it's the old Rocky quote. It's not how many times you get hit, but how many times you get hit and get back up.
Yeah.
It's true. I mean, if you lost a loved one, they don't want you sitting here grieving, and you're still here. And,
right.
I don't know what people believe, but everybody has their own belief system. But I thoroughly believe that time moves differently in those places, and where it might be 20, 30, 40 years, or even just a year. It's like the same day for them.
Right.
So.
Well, and like you were saying, it's really difficult because people want to reach out, and so many people reach out right after something happens, when you're in the midst of planning the funeral and doing all the things. And it's that 3 weeks later, that would be a good time to reach out.
Yeah,
you're kind of worked through the shock, I guess, of it. And that's where you really need people. And a lot of times they don't reach out then. I've done in another podcast, Flip Flops and Tears, I talked to people that have gone through really traumatic and tragic events. And inevitably, every single one of them has ended up coming out of that by creating something that would have never been created had it not been for the things that happen. And you've taken this grief and turned it into something meaningful with a YouTube channel and a podcast. Can you share with us what inspired those projects and what you hope to accomplish with them and just what they are?
Well, my therapist has been amazing. He's been wonderful. People, sometimes they feel more comfortable talking to a stranger than they do somebody they're close to, because maybe they can separate the emotion if they're talking to a stranger. It just hit me one day to, even if nobody listens to the podcast, it gives me an outlet to talk about it.
Yeah.
And things that I felt, things that I still feel. And, you and I were talking earlier before we went on the air about the book, It's Okay Not to Be Okay. And that's a strong message. Anybody that's going through grief, and I would recommend that book. I mean, it tells you anything you're feeling is not wrong. And a lot of people just, they think they're doing it the wrong way. And your feelings and your emotions are yours, and nobody can tell you you're wrong.
Yeah, I remember my first big loss started very early. It was 8th grade. And a very good friend of mine and his little sister, who I taught to ride a bike, both were killed in a car accident. And I remember 5 days after I was at school, and I couldn't stop crying. I mean, I just couldn't believe at that age that somebody could be gone forever and that could happen. And I remember kids at school going, "Are you still crying about that?" And I just was like, is something wrong with me that I am having a really hard time understanding what life is now that these significant people, I'm not seeing him in school anymore. He's not in my class anymore. He's gone forever. And everybody's going back to normal. Everybody's seemingly okay. And I'm not. That book would have been very helpful to me in 8th grade.
Yeah, I was in high school with the first one that I really remember. We were friends, played basketball up at the Beulah pool and stuff like that. We weren't best friends. We didn't hang out a lot, but he had some people over to his house. We lived in the same neighborhood, and him and one of his buddies was playing with a gun, and it went off, and they helicoptered him out of the neighborhood, but, he passed. And it's just like, As far as adult life goes, my first big loss was my grandfather, and, he spoiled me rotten.
Mm-hmm.
And that hit me really hard, especially after we had moved up here and I wasn't seeing him every day. It just, that hit me really hard, but it was I was able to process as the natural order of things.
Right.
And even when his name was Mark Drake back in high school, even when he passed as young, it was tragedy, but you play with a gun, that kind of stuff happens. So I was able to process it that way. And because I was raised on guns, we lived out in the country, a lot of gun safety when I was a kid. Out of all the stuff that had led up, even with Isaac, my dad's diagnosis. I mean, take Isaac out of the equation, it was natural order.
Yeah.
But once Sarah died, I don't know.
Yeah, there's nothing natural order about that.
Well, not only that, but it's the first time I'd ever questioned my own mortality, and that's not a good place in your head.
No.
To me. I mean, we all know that we were born to die.
Right.
It's not something, you need to dwell on, you need to think about. I was never one to contemplate suicide, but I went to bed a lot of times just not caring if I woke up.
Yeah.
So, it's like I said, when Sarah passed, it's the first time I ever started questioning my own mortality.
So let's talk about the podcast, because you're really getting into a focus on grief, healing, personal experience. It's called Let's Talk with Jason B. What kind of conversations do you hope to have through this platform? And are you talking to other people on the podcast, or?
No, I'm just talking. It's just
Okay.
me sharing how I feel about certain things. The last episode I did was, about, happy times, happy occasions. But you take a look and you kind of look, or you take that step back and you look around at the people that aren't there. My oldest daughter and her husband are expecting their first child in July. And that's the, I looked at her name's Tori, and I looked at her and they were doing the gender reveal, and it's a girl, and due in July.
Wow.
Sarah's birthday was July 19th. The first three were all born in November. When my ex-wife got pregnant with Sarah, she was due in July. I'm like, I can't do another one in November. But she was 4 days away from mine. She was 4 days after mine. And that was what I always told her. She was a late birthday present to me. And but looking around at Tori and Austin's gender reveal, and my dad hadn't been long past, and just looking around, he was. He made light, he knew he didn't have much long. He always called Tori Lucy from the time she was born. And every time she'd go over, Lucy, when you gonna make me a great grandpapa? You got to have a baby before I die. She's like, Papa, don't say that. And, he was so excited when she told everybody she was pregnant. So I'm looking around, he's not there. Sarah's not there. They called Mark Uncle Mark. He's not there. And it's just like, you try to blink back tears and be happy for them and not bring them down. But Christmas it's like one of our traditions. There's a place in Southside called Pino's Pizza, and that's where we'd all go for Christmas Eve. We go to church, go to Pino's, and go right around, see some lights, and come back. And we always took a picture in front of the tree. The wait staff, the owners, they know us, and sitting there looking at those pictures and watching the number dwindle down each year. And that's kind of stuff I talk about. And I offer people, if you want to, make a comment, I'll respond to you. If you want to private message me, I'll respond to you. If you don't feel comfortable throwing a comment out there, it's stuff people think that they don't talk about.
Right.
And it's kind of, like I said again, even if they don't comment, they don't message me, as long as they know it's okay to talk about it. It's okay to feel that kind of way. And it's okay to let people know. It's like, hey, this is supposed to be a good time. What's the matter with you? Oh, nothing. I'm enjoying myself. I know Sarah should be here. I know my dad should be here. It's like, that's nothing wrong with that. It's just stuff people don't really talk about.
Right. Well, and they feel so alone, I think. I mean, I'd imagine when you were going through that, it sounds like you had a lot of support, but you don't know a lot of people that are going through as much. And so it must feel very, very alone to have that much grief piled up. So I think for you sharing this, are you also sharing any tools or anything about how you kind of got from the place where you didn't care if you woke up in the morning to caring again, and maybe how you got there to help if anybody else is in that place?
A lot of therapy.
Yeah.
A lot of books, a lot of soul searching, talking to pastors. My fiance has been amazing. You talk about people feeling alone. That's how I felt. And yeah, I had a good support system, but it wasn't my kid. It's so different with each person because, you lose a child, and I don't wish that on anybody. I don't care who you've lost. It's a different kind of grief. And the one thing I'll say to people, if somebody loses somebody, don't turn around because you lost somebody 2 years ago and go, oh, I know what you're going through, because everybody is different.
Yeah. And
it comes across as your grief is trying to overtake what's fresh.
Right.
If somebody asks you about it, of course, you can share your experience, but don't interrupt what they're trying to tell you with, I lost my mom 2 years ago. I understand, because I'm telling you, you don't.
And I lost my mom is very different than I lost my child. When you talk about the natural order, yes, it's devastating to lose a parent, but there is nothing on this planet harder than losing a child.
Yeah, one of the things that my oldest daughter said, it was me, her, and their mom standing at the gravesite, and she got a tear in her eye, and I'm like, what? I didn't ask what was wrong. I said, what are you thinking? Talk to me. What's going on? She goes, Sarah was supposed to be here to help me do this when it's y'all's time. Now I'm going to do this alone. And it was like, but it's like I said, it's just stuff that people don't talk about. And it took me a long time to figure out that I'm not alone, but that's how you feel. And when my dad passed in February, again, we knew it was coming, but it didn't make it any easier.
Are we talking about February that just passed?
Yes, ma'am.
So he just passed.
Yeah, they had given him a 2 to 5 year lifespan in 2021 when he was diagnosed. I researched that disease. He did smoke, but he had been quit for 25 years. It was not a smoker's disease. If you look it up, it's something like a lot of military guys come home with when they're in the field and they're burning stuff, that they're breathing those chemicals. And he worked in the printing business for a long time. He was on the camera mixing up all those chemicals back before, people actually took precautions for that, made you wear a mask.
Right.
So can't be sure, but that's kind of where we think it came from. The last 2 weeks of his life, he had called me and wanted to know if he'd come out there and stay with me. And I'd tried to get him to come out there before, because they have a tri-level, and I have a 1-story, and I'm out in the country now. So I'm like, it's good country air. I tried to tell him, I'm like, you should come out here. It's a 1-story. Your cord will reach to the deck. It'll reach to the front porch. You can sit out here. But he called and wanted to know if he'd come out there. And I said, yeah, everything okay? And he's like, yeah, I just want to come out there with you. And so the last 2 weeks of his life, I had him. And
good.
Like I said, it's coming. It doesn't make it any easier, but even with Sarah and Mark and everybody else that we lost, he was my rock. He didn't try to make it better. We talk about the old days of playing music in Martinsville and different stuff. He's a big Yankee and Duke fan. He'd be going crazy right now with Duke in the Final Four. Before he came out to my house, he called me every day. And if he didn't call, I'd call the house. Man, everything okay? I knew he was sleeping, but I just want to make sure, because especially toward the end, he was sleeping a lot, really, exhausted with any little thing he did. But yeah, he come out there, and the hospice team gave me a little pamphlet, and God, I can't remember how they worded it, but it was, they have, when they're not doing a whole lot, sleeping a lot, when they'll get up and one last time and have a lot of energy, and that'll be there. Yeah. I forgot what they called it.
I've heard that too.
I wished I could remember it, but the last week he hadn't eaten, wasn't doing a whole lot. And then, that Sunday that Washington was in the, he's a big Redskin fan. He wouldn't call them the Commanders. They were the Redskins to him. And I woke him up. He watched that game, and he watched Kansas City, and he wanted something to eat, and got him out of the bed, put him in the wheelchair, and he was sitting there watching it. And I looked in there and saw him nodding, and I'm like, you ready to get back into bed? He's like, yeah, but he talked to my mom on the phone. He had talked to one of the boys on the phone. And after that, he was pretty much done. He had a nurse and one of the assistants come out to wipe him off and everything. They came out Tuesday. I went in there and said, hey, you awake? Melissa's coming. Yeah, I'm awake. And he said, where's Annie? I'm like, you want the dog? And he's like, yeah. So I called her, and she come in there, and he's patting her on the head, and she was licking his hand, and the doorbell rang. It was Melissa, and she come in there, and right after, the other lady got there and to wipe him off and stuff, and then that was pretty much it. He was awake enough to kind of roll to one side and help the lady out, and he went to sleep, and I kept going there and checking on him. And my fiance, like I said, she's a school teacher. We had to post the DNR on there, because if it wasn't posted, she by law would have to give him CPR. But she checked on him at like 6:50 the next morning, and she said he was still breathing, but it was really shallow. I didn't get up much longer after that. It was like 7:20. I got up, and I'd given him his medicine. I used the bathroom and took the dog out and came back in. It was like 7:25. I went there to give him his medicine, and it was a dropper. Even when he was asleep, he didn't like the taste, so he didn't. Yeah. And so, but the lights were off, TV was on, so I could see what I was doing, and put the dropper in his mouth and press a little stuff for it to go in there. Nothing. And I'm like, Daddy, don't you do this to me this morning. And I touched him, and his arm was starting to go cold. His head was still warm, but so it was sometime in that 30-minute time frame that he was gone. And it's with him in that condition, you're sad, but he's not suffering anymore.
Right.
It doesn't make it any easier, but
yeah,
because where he was in the house, he was upstairs by himself, not by himself, but upstairs at his house, and he kept the door shut a lot. And when he got over there, I just put a gate in front of the door to keep the dog out. And it was the room he was in was right there at the kitchen. Like I said, I've got a 1-story rancher. We're talking to him through the door while we were.
That's great.
It was always looking there on him, checking him.
Yeah, I love that.
So.
I mean, you're talking like not only have you lost all these people, but you also had to deal with actually 2 people that passed away in your home.
Well, that's why
that's a whole nother level.
Well, that's why I moved to Dinwiddie. Was 2 reasons. Mark passed in that house. Well, I got that house. It was supposed to be the 3 of us. And then I look one day and it's just me. Like you said, he passed in that house. But VDOT had also put up a sign right up the road, one of those in memorial, drive safely in memory of Sarah Linn Ingram. And I passed that damn sign probably 8 to 10 times a day. I just couldn't take it anymore.
Yeah.
And my dad was so gracious because I got the house to help with him. And I went over and sat down and talked to him. I said, I got to move. I can't do this. And he was like, I understand. I'll be over. Don't worry. I'll still come over. I said, but I can't do this every day. My fiance and I moved. I got a house out in Dinwiddie, and it's quiet. Still getting used to it. I lived in Chesterfield from the time we moved up here till, my little brief stint in Myrtle, but I've always been in Chesterfield. So, yeah, it's.
Do you have your fiance in bubble wrap? I feel like I would be like.
It's kind of funny you say that. I need to. Last year, August or September, we had a really bad storm out there and the power went out, and we'd been out on the deck. She will kill me for telling this. But she came in, no lights, 10 pair of flip-flops. And as she's coming through the utility room, her flip-flop slipped because it was wet. And she went face first in the refrigerator. Into the refrigerator? And it's one of the big steel ones. And busted her orbital bone. Oh. Had to have surgery on her. Wow. I was like, why are you trying to fight the refrigerator? It's a little bit bigger than you. Yeah, she and I have a lot in common. I definitely have had some, I fall all the time. Yeah, trip into walls. I was sitting over there in the recliner, and I heard this big crash, and I was like, you okay? And I'm like, oh, Lord. And I grabbed my phone and went over there with the light, and when I saw the blood, it scared me to death. It scared me to death, and I called 911. So. Good grief. You, when you were talking about this, so the baby is due, your granddaughter is due this July? Yes, ma'am. Is that right? One of the things, I don't think when we talked offline that I told you about, but the summer of COVID, first summer of COVID, I guess that was 2020, right? Yes. We're all scared to death and worried about everyone. And my brother-in-law's little sister, who was about 30, was hit by a bus in Brooklyn and killed. Her name was Sarah. Wow. And my stepfather died years ago. His name was Sam. And so when my sister had her first daughter, she named her Samara, which is Sarah and Sam combined. And every time I look at her, I think of her aunt, Sarah. And I think that in a way, it's so, even though they're not there to see it, who knows what she will have of them inside her that she's bringing back to you guys. So. I told Tori, I said, having a girl due in July, I said, if you don't think there's some divine intervention there. That's right. We don't know what she's naming her yet, but she did say that her middle name will be Lynn. She's carrying that tradition on. And where that came from, her mom was picking out these long names. And I'm just like, And it was about 3 o'clock in the morning one night my mom called. And I'm like, everything okay? I had a dream. I'm like, thank you, Martin Luther, for waking me up at 3 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, what is it? She goes, and my grandfather I was so close to was her dad. She's like, Daddy was holding the baby. We were in the hospital. I'm like, okay. And she goes, he asked what her name was. She goes, and I just spit out one of those names that Vicky was talking about. And he said, he looked right at her and said, no, I can't pronounce that. Her name's Sarah. And I'm like, oh, okay. Because that sounded exactly like something he would say, old country boy. Hung up the phone. Vicky said, everything all right? Told her what she said. She goes, we're naming her Sarah, aren't we? I said, yep, good night.
Wow.
And so, yeah, so I went and Linn was his last name. That's where it came from. So Sarah Linn.
I'm Jessica Linn, by the way.
Hers was Linn. Not sure.
Linn. Yeah,
so
I'm Lynn.
Yeah, that was
but
his
the double N's.
Yeah, that was his last name.
We got the double N's.
That's where it came from. And, again, you got to go back to what people believe and what they don't. I went to, we were expecting that snow on February 19th. So I went on the 18th before the weather hit, and it was the 3-year anniversary of her passing. And I went and I went, hey, I'm here a day early, honey, because I don't know if I can be here tomorrow. If I can, I'll come back. But I'm sitting there talking to her, and Dad was cremated because he was claustrophobic. And I said, I got the spot. Once emotional, but once Isaac's dad gave us a spot for her, I asked the cemetery, I'm like, is the one beside of her available? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, oh, okay. So I put a little bit of money down and start paying on it every month. And I told her, I said, baby, when I can afford it, I'm going to, put a cremation bench right here next to you and be for all of us. And I'll get your pop out here with you, as soon as I can. And again, believe what you want to, but I heard her voice as clear as day say, thanks, Dad, but I already got him.
Wow. Wow.
Sorry.
I believe it. I believe every bit of it. And the dates are crazy. So Sarah passed in February 3 years ago?
Yes.
Okay. So my stepson's mother passed 3 years ago, March. And I realized yesterday that he came into my life in March. It was years ago, so I didn't connect that it was March that I came into his life or he came into mine, and then his biological mom passed in March. And then about a month ago, we filed for adoption so that I could legally adopt him, not because I needed to, but just for him. And the adoption papers were finalized and signed off by a judge a couple days ago. So it ended up ironically being that he got a new mom, let's just say legally in March. I think there's just, when you really start putting those things together, like July for you, I think people need to listen to that stuff and take solace in it.
Well,
it's somebody trying to give us comfort.
Well, that, and you talk about that, it's kind of a segue what I was going to say. My grandfather passed away on October 19th, 2001. Sarah was born July 19th, 2002. She was born 9 months to the day that he passed, right around the same time he passed. And I said when I was talking about her at the funeral that I knew he had sent me an angel. He just didn't tell me that it was only for a little while.
Right.
And she passed February 19th. Wow. Isaac was killed on August 9th, but where it was a crime, it took a little while, longer than normal for his services. He was buried on August 19th. I'm like, I cannot get away from the 19th.
Yeah.
I'm looking around going, am I missing something?
Right. Am I supposed to do something big on the 19th? Is that supposed to be, well, maybe, and also bubble wrap your fiance on the 19th, if no other day. Just keep her tight.
Yeah, her sister's due July 11th, and I'm like, well.
It's going to be late.
That's what both of them were late, so, and this is her first one, so.
You're going to have to give us an update about that.
We'll see. Yeah. As soon as she has her, I'll let you know.
Let's jump into public speaking, because in addition to the podcast, Let's Talk with Jason B, and then your YouTube, is that called the same thing, by the way? Is that?
It's just youtube.com/Jason B. Ingram.
Okay. And we'll put the links for Jason's podcast and YouTube in the body of this Facebook. But let's talk about public speaking, because that, I think it sounds like is something that's important to you. And tell us a little bit about what you kind of hope to share and what might make sense for people that would like to look at bringing you into certain events to speak.
Well, there's a group called Compassionate Friends, but it's specifically for people that's lost a child. And my anger at first, their mom actually started going. She tried to talk me into going, and I didn't want no part of it. And she said, well, it's really good. I'm like, no, it's not. I said, those people's world are devastated, and so is ours. And I said, I don't mean to sound how this is going to come out, but if I go talk to somebody that lost little Johnny, it didn't affect my life at all, just like me losing Sarah didn't affect theirs. I'm still kind of just into not sure how that really works. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm sure it's helped some people because they wouldn't be around if it didn't. I'm just looking, again, it's kind of like the podcast. I want to be able to be face to face with people, and it doesn't matter who they lost, whether it was their mom, their dad, a child, or brother, or sister, niece, nephew, how you're feeling. It's perfectly normal to let you know that you're not alone.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I want the message to be, because it's, like I said, it doesn't matter just because somebody, like you were talking about with the school, just because somebody lost a friend of theirs, that could have been like their sister, that could have been like their confidant who they went to, just because they weren't blood related or it wasn't whatever that you think it should be for them to feel that way.
Right. It's
okay to feel that way. And that's the message I want to share, is kind of, and kind of the stages that I went through. You know, one of the things we were talking about, that book, It's Okay Not to Be Okay, that she talks about, is the 5 stages of grief. And off the top of my head, I can't remember the author's name that wrote that back in the 60s, but she said that lady had stated several times she wished she never wrote the book, because a lot of her profession had went to basically telling people that came in experiencing grief that was the way they had to do it. And everybody's different. Now, those stages are there. You know, of course they're there, but, you know, it's not in any particular order.
Yeah.
You know, one doesn't hit you harder than the other, or one will hit you harder than the other. And that's where she was apologizing for her profession. So,
and you can be stuck in one of them for a really long time rather than progressing through so quickly, you know, or whatever. Yeah, because I definitely got stuck in a few of those.
And again, that's okay, because we're all different. And like, a lot of people will do that. You know, we were talking about earlier. It's like, oh, well, you lost such and such. Well, don't do that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's if people need that outlet, you know, they'll ask, well, how did you get through it? And then of course answer them. But people need to vent. People need to talk. People need to be alone, and all that's okay. And I don't think, whether it's society or whether they're the people that are close to them, just don't. Maybe it makes them think about their own mortality. Maybe it makes them think about who they lost or whatever. But a lot of people do feel alone. And like me, I had a good support system, but my mind felt like I was alone.
Yeah.
Where, like I said, you know, my oldest daughter, they were each other's first serious relationship, and they've been together. God, he was 14 and she was 13, or 13 and 12, whatever they were. And after a couple of years, I'm like, yeah, this was not going anywhere. So I knew she had her plans out in front of her. But you love all your kids equally. But Sarah was the baby.
Yeah.
And too much like me for her own good. When I get mad, she's like, why are you getting mad? I'm just like you. I'm like, yeah, but I wasn't like that at your age. It took me 40 years to get this way. So it was, like I said, I felt like, and you know, it's like I told Tori, because I didn't want her thinking that I was closer to one than I was the other. When I told her, I said, you were 35 at 12 years old.
Yeah.
You know, you just, I never had to tell you what to do. I never had to, I said, I worried about you, of course, but I didn't have to worry if you were doing something stupid. I said, you didn't need me.
Yeah.
I said, you had a plan, you followed it. I mean, and where she was so much more mature, she buckled down. She was done with high school. She wanted to get out of there. She didn't like what was going on. So she buckled down and took extra classes and night classes her junior year to be able to graduate early. She was just done with it.
Wow.
I said, you got a good, you know, your head was on straight. And I said, your sister was the one that I had to watch. And I always knew I had something to do, whether good, bad, or indifferent.
Yeah.
I knew I was going to be going somewhere. So
I think going back to talking about how people respond around you, one of the things that I noticed is that a lot of times you want to talk about the person that you've lost at a certain point in the grieving process. You really, it helps you to talk about them and remember them. And I've found that it makes people really uncomfortable. Like they're really, really uncomfortable when you start talking about somebody that's passed and they know it's a really intense loss for you. You can feel them tense up.
Yes, but the biggest thing I've noticed differently is being out there where I'm at that convenience store 3-4 times a week, so I've gotten to know those people pretty well. And, when my dad passed, I didn't say anything, but he was like, you okay? You seem a little down today. And it's like, well, my dad just passed away. And he's, I'm so sorry, which is kind of what you get with a brother or sister, mother, father, whatever. But when you tell somebody your child died, it's instant.
They don't know what to do.
No, they don't. And so you kind of build up a wall of not really saying a whole lot about it unless it's family or a close friend.
Because you're protecting them.
Yeah, because they immediately go like ghostly white and don't know what to say.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say it for you. I mean,
Right.
That's the biggest difference I've noticed. But I will tell you, we talk about all the different people that's passed. If something happened to Tori, you might as well come find me in a mental institution somewhere. The reason I say that is my aunt, my dad's sister, one of them. We've been through a lot. His youngest sister, her first kid back in the 70s was breached before they could realize that. And, they told her he wouldn't live through the night, and then they said he wouldn't live through the week. He lived to be 8 before he passed. Then her next child, he was addicted for a while, and he was coming off. He was on the methadone, but apparently he took a little too much of that. And he was 32 or 33, but his heart exploded in his sleep. Oh. That was his youngest sister. The next one up, that was between the two of them, within this past year, she lost both her sons. They weren't addicted, but they dabbled in drugs. Derek was 2 or 3 years younger than me, and Hunter was 35. But
these are your cousins,
yes,
right?
Yes,
yeah. Okay.
And Hunter went and he was in an abandoned house, just kind of getting away from somebody. It's Danville, Virginia, by the way, it's in the country. He wanted to get away from people, and he went in this abandoned house and lit a candle and passed out, and the candle burnt the house up with him in it. And then I'm not sure what Derek was taking, but less than a year later, he took something that had fentanyl in it, and it killed him. So she lost both her sons in less than a year. And then on top of that, the ongoing joke was my grandmother, my dad's mom, was go out and live us all.
Yeah.
She was still kicking and getting a little slower toward the end, but I was so glad I got to take him back down there for Christmas of 2024, because she passed in April of 2024. So he got to see her one last time. And my aunt lived with her too. So within a 12-month time frame, she lost both her sons and her mother. I can't imagine.
I've said that if one of my children died, put me in an institution, you say that, but you just find a way. You just find a way, like you found a way. I mean, if you would have looked back at yourself 10 years ago and said, look at all that I'm going to face, I don't think you would have thought you'd be here right now and you'd be doing this work for other people to try and help them rather than be in an institution, right?
One thing I learned about myself that I'm trying to figure out how to fix is, it's funny I say fix, but it hit me at one point that I've just got this savior complex. That's not thinking I'm Jesus or something, but every time somebody's got a problem that I'm close to,
that you want to fix it.
I want to fix it. I remember when, getting off the phone after finding out my dad was diagnosed, and I was just like, I can't fix this.
Yeah.
And then I remember looking right at her mom when we were at MCV with her on that gurney, and I just looked right at her. I said, I can't fix this. And it never really occurred to me that that's what I always tried to do, to shelter the people I cared about from whatever the situation may be. And talking about her on that gurney is one of the things I talked about, which episode I did, but just images you'll never get out of your head. Seeing her on that gurney was one, and having to go down and identify the body, and then seeing her in the casket, and then finding my dad with his mouth wide open.
And Mark, I'm sure.
Yeah, and Mark.
Let's shift gears and talk about your books, because you're now also writing multiple books. So there's I'm Not Alone and Neither Are You, and then some children's books that were actually inspired by Sarah Linn's rescues. Tell us about all that.
She would have brought the farm home. And where we live, down there where my parents are, I don't know if people they have half a heart, but kittens are always being dropped off in that circle. And right behind us is another circle. So I don't know if they're coming from our circle or that circle, but there's always umpteen kittens running around there. And she was trying to bring them all in the house. I'm like, stop. And then with a dog, she loved that dog. Oh, my God. She told me, hey, Dad, I signed up on the Rover app to dog sit this weekend. I'm like, you did what? They're paying me $75. I'm like, so you're getting $75 for me to watch a dog. Got it. Dad. I'm like, why didn't you just ask me for the money? I'd have gave it to you. So the guy brought the dog. Sweet. got in my bed the first night. I'm like, oh, this is what we're doing. Okay. And he was supposed to come get her that Monday. We didn't hear from him. I texted him, give me his number. Didn't hear from him until like Wednesday. And he started giving me a sob story saying he had to move back in with his dad and his sister was allergic and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, look, man, I like the dog. I'll help you out all I can. Just don't ignore my phone calls.
Yeah.
Or my text messages. And so he come back over that Friday, gave me some money for food. I asked, did I care while I was watching her if he come over and walked or something? And so I'm like, no, that's fine. We never heard from him again.
You are kidding me.
Never heard from him again. So we got her, and right before when we were getting ready to get the house, right before she passed, she went to see one of her friends that had a dog, a sweet dog, but the girl also had a kitten. I mean, a teeny tiny kitten. And the dog was trying to play with it and wound up knocking the cat off or something, and it was limping. And she didn't ask. She just told the girl, I'm taking this cat. You're not taking care of it. I'm like, I don't want another cat. I got both of them. And she was very passionate about the animals. She was a type that if she saw a homeless person on the street, she'd go give them $10. If she didn't have $10, she would borrow it and have to owe somebody $10.
Yeah.
And me and her mom both told her, like, honey, not all those people are legit. She was like, I'd rather make sure somebody got it that needed it than worry about somebody that didn't need it. And I'm like, oh, okay. That's just who she was. She wanted to rescue everybody. And I guess figuring out about myself what I did, she might have got it honestly. So she named the cat Nezuko, Nezzy for short. When I asked the guy what the dog's name was, he told me it was like Annie-Opie or Anti-Opie or something. I'm like, what in the world is that? It was like Wonder Woman's mom's cousin or something.
What?
So that's what I said. I tried every pronunciation I could think of that name. The dog, just nothing. I'm like, you're Annie. And she answers to it, and little orphan Annie's kind of appropriate.
Yeah.
But she loved both of them. The first book's going to be titled Our Mommy is in Heaven, The Adventures of Annie and Nezuko. So it's kind of what I'm working on with that. And not looking to get rich off anything, but if any proceeds come in for any, like all those books, if anything comes in off the series of the children's stuff, it'll go to the Richmond Animal League. Mm-hmm. It's just, that's just where I wanted to go. That's what she would want, and help out the animals. And, it was just kind of a way to keep her memory alive as well, because they'll all say in memory of Sarah Linn.
Yeah, I love that. Plus children, I mean, any book that has animals and rescuing animals, I mean, kids are going to love that.
Yeah, like the next one got the title ready, or, going to our new home or whatever.
Yeah.
However I wind up, titling it, it'll be in succession. So.
Yeah, I love that. So what's your goal for the children's book inspired by Sarah Linn? What's your goal for releasing or getting that out time-wise?
This is all new to me. And okay. I found out last night that you can self-publish on Amazon.
Yeah, you can.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So that might be an avenue for me to look at. I want to get the first book done, and if I can get any interest out of it, then I might do it on Amazon. I might do it somewhere else.
Yeah. We can help you with that, by the way.
Oh,
we do that.
Oh, who knew?
We'll chat later.
But yeah, you get traction on Amazon, you can get traction just about anywhere.
That's right. So. And what about I'm Not Alone and Neither Are You? Have you finished that book?
No, that's a type a little bit and wipe the tear out of my eye and get up and.
Yeah, little doses when you can. I understand that. I do.
I mean, the emotions are good, but not too much.
Yeah, well, you got to be able to see to type.
Right.
Let's talk about the foundation, because if everything that I've said already isn't enough, you're also looking to start a nonprofit foundation in honor of Sarah. What will that foundation support, and what impact do you hope to make with it?
Keep her memory alive and stuff she was passionate about. Hopefully I can, get that cremation bench next to her for my dad. I really do want that. But once that's done, my next goals are going to be I'm sure it's still out there. I haven't looked in a while, but I know Isaac's family put up $10,000 for a reward to help solve it. And it's a shame that money makes people talk like that when it's just the right thing if you know something. But and if you do, call the Richmond Crime Solvers. 768-9000, I think.
We can post that in the podcast.
But I want to contribute some more to that, because the more it goes up, somebody might actually say something. Mm-hmm. Once that's done, whether it's the Richmond Animal League or the Richmond Animal League and some other shelters around the area, make donations in her name. Also help with the homeless. It's just like I said, she was just passionate about a lot of things, and she wasn't one of those that said, yeah, I want to be this, I want to be that. I don't know why, but she was drawn to this Hispanic community the way she was. But it wasn't I want to be an immigration lawyer. It was, I'm going to be an immigration lawyer. And she would have been.
When you really kind of look back at the last few years, is there anything that you would say is maybe the biggest lesson you've learned about grief or resilience? Or
if you're experiencing new grief, it's the first time, it's not going to come overnight. You can listen to other people. You can read the books you want. You have to figure out what's right for you. What's going to make you get up in the morning. And it took me a long time to realize that, and people will take this the wrong way they'll look at you sideways, but they passed, you didn't. And it's not a matter of being nasty with that phrase. It's a matter of they loved you. They don't want you sitting down here, crying over them every day when you still have part of your life to lead.
Yeah.
And it took me a while. Sarah would not want anybody crying over her. She'd tell you, she loved to have fun. She got a friend of hers that still posts the Snapchat memories and all that stuff with them singing and having a ball, and just, those bring a tear to my eye when I see them, but it makes me smile too, to know that family's not the only one still remembering her. That's the main thing. You can take advice. You can take everything in. Write it down if you need to. Hey, Amy said this, John said this, and take it all into account. But again, you have to figure out for you what's going to make you get up in the morning and keep moving. Because if you don't, it's very easy to just lay there and why this, why them, why me, why am I going through this? And I will say this, and this has taken me a long time to get to as well. I think God had a way of taking her early because she was having a hard time and again, it'd be hard enough standing next to somebody that you don't know, getting shot multiple times.
Yeah.
But when you're standing next to somebody you think you're going to spend the rest of your life with, and they might have, when who knows? But at the time, that's what they thought. And she was headed down a bad path. She was having a hard time. Again, I cannot imagine what she was dealing with. I mean, sometimes she would talk about it. Sometimes she wouldn't. Other times she just wanted to lay on my lap and let me, pet her hair and just silence. You have to keep moving and, figure out a way to honor them, but not let it control you.
Yeah.
Because if you do, you'll probably be there a lot quicker than you were supposed to.
Right.
Like I said, I never questioned my mortality till Sarah died. I'd buried people, great-grandmother, grandmothers, but it's like, tomorrow's not promised. We all know that. And you can hear all the motivation you want, which is not really what I'm looking to do. I wouldn't say motivational speaking is what I'm looking to do. It's more of let's chat.
Yeah. But
it smacks you right in the face that, hey, tomorrow's not promised. Today is the only today we got. There's 2 days you can't do anything about, and that's yesterday and tomorrow.
Would you ever be open to somebody who lost a child just because that is such a unique grief reaching out to you? I mean, are you open to having one-on-one conversations?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm very open to it. Mm-hmm. But I also want them to understand that, especially if it's fresh, that what I tell them might make them mad.
Right.
They might not understand.
Yeah.
It just, there's several different things. But with the YouTube channel, not only is it that's the stuff that's on there, but if you're a fan of gospel music, my dad was a very talented musician. He recorded an album with the legendary gospel group, the Ambassadors, back in 1969. And then he did some stuff after we moved up here with the local gospel group. And there's a lot of his stuff on there. My grandmother actually recorded 2 gospel albums in Nashville.
Wow.
And those are on that YouTube channel as well. And if anybody wants to learn about Sarah Linn or Isaac, their tribute videos are on there. My dad's tribute videos on there. My dad and Sarah's funeral's on there. The stories that John Burkett has shared about Isaac, every story he's published, I've shared on my YouTube channel. And I can't remember the guy's name that actually asked me if John could come speak with me, but I'll never forget this. We were getting ready to head out the door to go to the funeral home, make plans. And he called and I answered the phone. He asked, did I care if he wrote an article about Sarah? Because a lot of times the passenger in the car was overlooked.
Yeah.
And I said, no, that's fine. I said, but I can't talk right now. I'm getting ready to head to the funeral home. And he was like, when are you going? I said, we're walking out the door in like 5 minutes. He goes, I only need 3. I'm like, okay. So I answered his questions, hung up the phone, didn't think nothing about it. By the time I was leaving the funeral home, he sent me a story to review, And he did a phenomenal job. He entitled the Chesterfield teen to be buried in prom dress she never got to wear.
Wow.
That's what we buried her in, because she couldn't go they canceled prom because of COVID. And he did it. That story, it reached a lot of places. I mean, I don't know if it got to all 50 states, but it got to a lot of them.
Wow. That's amazing. Well, I'll share a link for that too. So for everybody listening, all you need to do is go to the body of the podcast from wherever you're listening, and there are going to be links for everything that Jason and I have talked about today. And you heard him. Reach out if you need some support, but just know he's gonna give it to you straight. And you might or might not be ready for that.
I'll give to you what worked for me, and you can take it from there.
Yeah. Jason, thanks for being on River City Podcast and sharing your story.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to River City Podcast. If you're interested in setting up a podcast for your business, go to rivercityconsulting.com.